Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Samí Haiman-Marrero from Urbender, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from You Do You. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of I Have Something to Say. I'm very excited because today, as our guest, we have a really good friend, a solid guy, my partner in crime when we work together, and still, because we talk at least 4 or 5 times a year, to touch base and trying to figure out how to work together again, because we have so much fun doing that. My friend Peter Smith, who I call Smitty, and I think everybody calls Smitty. He's the senior sales director at an international global company called S4M. He's ahead with the times because he fell into that whole technology and mobile. I mean, I really admire him for that, but I'm not surprised because I got to tell you that everything I learned about good salesmanship, and which is critical when you own your own business, I learned from this man right here. Smitty, thank you.
Hola. How are you, my dear?
I'm doing great. Welcome all the way from New Jersey.
All the way from dirty Jersey. Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for those glowing accolades and that wonderful introduction. I don't know if I'm even half worthy of that, but great seeing you as always, because, I love you to death. And we did, you weren't lying about the fact that we did work very well together, and we accomplished a lot and broke some new business that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. So thank you.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's so great to see you. And I know that we're always trying to figure out ways to, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point,
Sure it is.
And just knowing you for such a long time, right now it's 16 years that we know each other. And and I just it was awesome. We both have a really strong background in publishing. When I came into the Post, into the daily newspaper, to launch a Latino section that was in English, right? But in culture, it was like unfreaking heard of.
It was a hit product. It was a hit product. Yeah.
It was. That was around 2003, 2004, and something that was, I think, ahead of its time. We're always talking about how that it would have probably worked so much better now, but it was exciting times. And so coming in from the national advertising and marketing sales world, because I had been with national magazines, into a daily was a whole other ball.
365,
yeah, totally. And that's how we met. It was really, really great to work with you for those 4 years.
Well, I got to be honest with you, you're a welcome addition. And this is not the Mutual Admiration Society. This is just the reality of my world, because I initially spent 15 years as an institutional broker on Wall Street. And when that business changed and evolved into technology and mergers on the bank side, because they were my end users, the bank stores doing institutional side of finance. When that was over, I got into the media business. And the biggest thing is that I came from a very transactional, quick paced business. So getting into the media business, which is also very quick. I started out Discovery for a year, but they had a consolidation. So when I met Pat Judge, our former boss, who was a classic New Yorker, he kind of hit it off. We were brothers from another mother in a sense. So he was this hard driving sales guy, whatever. So when Lachlan Murdoch, back to your point about tempo, which was by his design, he was understanding the metrics of the growth of the Hispanic marketplace and the population in the U.S. He said, let's do this. But the problem is that, it's like anything else in sales. You need, I think you mentioned the word authentic or whatever. It's all about being real. And going into the Hispanic marketplace is a little bit different than the general market. So it's just a matter of who you're talking to, whether you're speaking in language or in culture. So together, I brought in my opinion, I brought the newspaper and the general market and the newspaper aspect, and then you brought the whole cultural Hispanic and those deep rooted relationships that you had fostered for many, many years. So we weren't selling. We were having conversations really, and you were telling about the opportunity, and most people took it to heart, saying that this is a really good opportunity, understanding that hockey stick growth curve of the Hispanic marketplace. So it all kind of worked out. So we kind of, it worked out good for both of us, I think.
Yes, totally. I mean, I just feel like when we met and we were put into this petri dish, right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that were very different for me. Coming from national magazines, yeah, the head honchos and stuff are always white men, but the staff was, women. A lot of because it was Condé Nast public, like glossy magazines and all of that, but coming into a newspaper, it was this was
it's a different game.
Yeah, it's a totally different game. It was kind of like rough, to be in that environment.
It's end-to-end action every minute of every day. The paper size, it's not, nothing's the same. Every day is a brand new game. It's almost new rules every day. I mean, you have the basics, but essentially, the news changes, everything, the environment changes, 9/11 happens, everything happens. So we had to adjust on a daily basis. And that was kind of, so I came from that helter-skelter world of trading two phones to your ear 20, for 8-10 hours a day, and then going out and entertaining at night. This was not completely dissimilar. Actually, it was a little calmer, actually, for me. And so, but the fun part is that I got to meet a lot of people. There were a lot of traditional people in there that were just kind of old school salespeople who just waited for the phone to ring and all that good stuff. But then when you meet somebody like yourself who comes from a go-get-it background, and I'm one of 7 children, and I, paid for school and doing all the things that everyone had to do, you learn pretty fast, because guess what? You don't really have a choice. And when you find other people that are of the same ilk, that's where I think, you kind of hit it off. So
yeah, totally. Your background is Irish, and we've talked about how Puerto Ricans and Irish have a lot of things in common. Number one, we're from, the descendants of people that live on an island, right?
Correct.
So, right. Number two, we're all about big families, familia primero, right? Number one, right? Yeah. And number two, we can party like nobody's business. We like a little,
a little, or maybe a lot.
So, I mean, I think of course I'm kidding, I think we just found common ground.
Sure.
Because I just feel like you're like a decent, solid dude, and in a world where it was like male dominated, you were always a class act, I mean, just took me under your wing.
But to me, the difference was that, again, going back, if it's a cultural thing you want to talk about real briefly, my parents, I guess predominantly Irish, and I think there's a little bit of German in there somewhere, but whatever it is, the fact is that we never saw black, white, brown. It wasn't like I was Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King. What it came down to was, when we were kids, we grew up in a mixed community, and it was like, if you were a good guy, you were a good guy. If you were a good girl, you were a good girl. So to me, my father was always like, you hire the best person, you do the best thing. So it was none of that stuff that is keeps being perpetuated now. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it didn't exist in my world.
Right.
And it wasn't tolerated, because it never had to be tolerated.
Well, I felt it. All I want to say is I felt it. When I came in, you feel those guards immediately. All eyes on you.
But can I tell you something? But the difference was, you could do it. The problem was, the fact is that when we were down a page in the newspaper, like, if we had to go up for a news story, so because you go up 4 pages, well, one of those 4 pages had to be an ad. And so there were, we had X amount of salespeople. And who did Pat Judge, or who we spoke about before, who did he come to? He came to you or me to fill that page and get one of your guys to come in and say, hey, listen, we need, so that's the type of thing. It's either you can do it or you can't. So
but I got to tell you again, it's like, what are those techniques to just get it done? I don't know anyone, honest to God, that hustles the way you do. Like, I don't know anybody that really, I mean, and it's, of course, you're banking on those solid relationships you've developed. And number two, you're just authentic. You
Well,
know, like
well,
what you see is
thank
what
you.
you get. And I think people appreciate that. And that's a big component in doing business.
Well, I thank you for that. And I got to tell you something, it was funny. I'm not obviously not bright enough to think about, doing LinkedIn because I
Stop
was
it.
doing LinkedIn before. No, no, before it was even, I was doing it because it was just a natural getting somebody a job, helping somebody out, doing stuff. And you just do it because, again, you come from the big family. It's always you're pulling somebody up or helping
Hmm.
somebody or somebody's helping you and you don't
Hmm.
forget it. So when that phone rings and you need its favor, you just do it. So I think that it really was unintended in the
Hmm.
sense of how it developed because I just think it's a natural thing. For me it was growing up. I have to love my parents. They
Hmm.
were well, while they were alive. They were fantastic people. They weren't wealthy or famous or whatever. But when 700 or 800 people show up at your funeral, that's something. And then granted they had a
Yeah.
bunch of kids and they knew a lot of people, but the
Hmm.
same token, they don't show up at bad people's funerals. So
Hmm.
trying to emulate that or even just being exposed to it kind of just goes into your workplace. And so when you have those conversations, because phony is kind of, I don't know, it's transparent. Like you can see it straight away. It's just like
Hmm.
when a salesman comes, you walk into a store and somebody gets you right at the front door. Can I help you? Or
Hmm.
there's always a timing. There's always a nuance to it.
Yeah.
So going back to what you had, your nuance from your background, my nuance from my background, it just blended and Tempo became a very successful. Going back to Tempo was a
Yeah.
very very successful product, and we were proud of it because it's like raising a child. It
Hmm.
was from nothing. So
Hmm.
it was created out of nothing, and so, Sandra, she did a good job on her side in terms of creating content, and then
Hmm.
our job was sell pages, and
Yeah,
that's what we did.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So
Yeah.
how interesting was that to get a mandate from, Pat, our VP back then of advertising and operations and all that to go on calls together. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember when he said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna have the Samí, because I was the only
Yeah.
this dedicated
Well,
person
you
to
knew you
to
knew
the section. Yeah, go out on calls, with the rest of the sales team,
right.
with agencies and with clients.
It just because it was foresight. Listen, Patrick, I think he's been there close to 30 years now. So he's a
Hmm.
street guy. He grew up in Hell's Kitchen. He knew the city. His father worked on the docks. So he's about as New York as you can get. We used to call him Slip Mahoney because he knew everybody and he talked the talk, but he looked like a shiny penny with
Oh, yeah.
his chalk line suits and
Hmm.
pinstripe suits. He looked like looked great. So, but he would go in, but he was authentic too. People liked him, and he was a
Hmm.
little bit more hard driving than both of us, even,
Hmm.
which is crazy to think about. But he also knew he had an intuition in himself about knowing what was going to succeed, and he was kind of a get it done guy too. So that whole blend that was like that we all had, it just kind of worked. I mean, listen, was it a little chaotic at times? Yeah, it's a newspaper. It's
Hmm.
365. Getting that thing out every day and getting those calls and call your guy and get this done and do, it's all part of it. So we
Yeah.
kept the lights on, and I got to tell you, of all the jobs I've had, including Wall Street, I don't know if I've had a more exposure to uh, celebrity parties and the whole good was. I met so many people, from Bill Clinton to Henry Kissinger it was just unbelievable the amount of people that you met. So it was a very exciting time. It was a very exciting, and I happen to like the Post for what it represents for New York. People say, Rupert Murdoch's political views or whatever.
Hmm.
It was really like to me, it was like the wise guy kid in class who said you never know what it was going to say. The front cover, what it was going to say, and people would complain about having its own voice.
Hmm.
But it was innovative enough not to be stuck in a rut of a conservative quote unquote newspaper. It said, hey, they were smart enough to say, hey, listen, we know the Latino market is going to grow, so we grew it.
Yeah, and it's about being authentic.
Yeah,
I give these presentations about authenticity in business, and I say you could be Gandhi-like, which is one extreme, or
yeah,
Gotti-like,
yeah, yeah,
Gandhi or Gotti, or
yeah.
somewhere in between. Most of us fall somewhere in between.
Sure,
No
sure.
one's like squeaky clean, and no one is, in
No,
terms of how you present yourselves, because you want to keep some stuff private,
of
so,
course.
but it's important. And so how is it, what's your magic sauce to develop these relationships with, like, when you're pitching new business? Like, what is your MO to give,
Well, I
our our audience some tips,
Yeah.
especially during these times where some of them are considering a career shift or starting their
Well,
own businesses,
you hit it right on the nose there. So let's just face it, even now with this coronavirus, almost take this out if you can for a second, but even now it's even harder because you're selling
Hmm.
into a market that doesn't want to buy. It's like selling ice to Eskimos, that's the proverbial saying. But when it comes right down to it is that you have to be mindful of people's time. The people just prior to this, now people almost have too much time, but now people don't, people didn't have enough time to get everything done. So
Hmm.
in order to meet with them, you number one had to have a value proposition and have
Hmm.
something that you can that actually meant something to them.
Hmm.
Calling up and saying hello, how you doing, how's your family, and all that stuff is good to a point. But in the end of the day, you really have to be able to help them do their job, because
Hmm.
it's not like the days where people are signing deals on the back of napkins anymore. Cocktail napkins after 3 martinis. No, that Mad Men days they're gone. So to me, being mindful of people's time, and then also, if you talked about new business to me was always one of those things where it wasn't hard because you always kind of either, again, before LinkedIn, if I knew you were a friend of say a friend of yours in the Hispanic community, I would say, Samí, do me a favor, give me a virtual introduction. Call him up to see if he has got 5 minutes. That's all he wanted his time, and just tell him I won't waste his time, and I'm not a jerk. And that's
Right.
and that's
That's it.
and if the person respects you, then you know what? Then he'll at least take the phone call. He may or may not do business. There's no guarantee you're going to get business, but at least you can have the conversation, and then you have the kind of the calling card to get in the door, just to have a real conversation. Because especially when you're talking about senior people in whether it's media or regardless of the business you're in, they don't have
Hmm.
time. So
Yeah.
just not wasting their time and getting past the virtual gatekeepers or whatever gatekeepers, because
Yeah.
emails, and and those blind cold calls. Unfortunately, I mean, I can't. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you bought something off a cold call? Have
No,
you
never.
ever, whether over the phone or the
Mm-mm.
email or whatever?
No.
So there is a better way, and mastering your Rolodex and your relationships without abusing them is, I
Yeah.
guess, that there's the nuance we were talking about before.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good advice about how to find that balance between tapping into your network
Right.
without abusing them or being or
Right.
imposing. Yeah. And
And by the same token, Simi, if I can also interrupt you again rudely, uh, what,
you can do whatever you want,
no,
Papa.
but what it comes down to is that these same people, I learned something on Wall Street. The same people you see on the way up are the same people you see on the way down. So
Hmm.
it's all about the respect that you show to people throughout your lifetime. So
Hmm.
when these people, you're going to see them, they're going to have these great jobs, but with shifts in media and the whole economic environment, we're seeing more now than any time.
Yeah.
A lot of these people are losing their jobs. So number
Yeah.
one, they don't have time to talk to you, but they also don't. They may not have time because or they don't have the power anymore. They're losing their job, or they've been,
Yeah.
whatever. So what it comes down to is you have to step up for them and try to help them when they're looking for a job. You're doing the same thing on the reverse side. Did you ever talk about talking to XYZ agency because they're looking for somebody? If
Yeah.
I've done that once, and I'm not bragging as much as
Yeah.
saying I've done
Yeah.
it. I've done it 50 times because
Yeah.
some people are always looking for good people.
Yeah.
Like the guy Chris you introduced me to before, he seems like a real gentleman. You don't get good people, hardworking people, and getting to stay because they're going to move on to a better opportunity. But when you do, you have to replace them. And
Yeah.
well, those people don't want to go through the current HR nightmare of what goes on now. So what
Yeah.
you want is good people working for you, and that's how you can help, and that's how you can give back.
Yeah. Yes, totally. Nothing better than a referral, right? From
Oh,
in terms of human resources, in terms
of
of
course,
hiring, and also buying a product or service too. That
of course,
referral is critical, and I think it's more meaningful. And as we're going through this collective experience,
yeah.
where also I think like weighing that's coming in to play even more than it used to,
No,
in how we
100%.
purchase and consume things too, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. You were talking about getting into technology earlier on,
Hmm.
and the funny part is that you talk about selling and difficulties in selling. I read something the other day. Everyone says they can sell until they try to sell, and
Mm.
the problem is I was talking to somebody yesterday. He said I could never do what you do, and he
Hmm.
goes because I can't deal with all of that I call it nuance, but some people just call it BS, and
Mm-hmm.
don't want to deal with all of the lying because his wife's in real estate and deals are about to close and they don't close. So he just said, so it's not easy, but it's not hard either if you decide that, you know what, you, even though we're going through a tough time now, my technology is a drive to store platform, a mobile technology that basically serves ads into the mobile phone via
Mm-hmm.
apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, and our end game is to have big brands, Mercedes, the usual suspects, the Targets, the Walmart, to drive them in store to now have them buy product.
Right.
Who's buying product now when they're homebound? They're buying it online. So
Right.
it's always about traversing. It's always about adjusting, and it's always about just being able to read the landscape instead of saying, "Oh my God, woe is me." Because, like, to your point, this is a
Mm-hmm.
collective issue, and no matter what vertical you talk to, I don't care if it's medicine, I don't if it's auto, whatever business you
Education, whatever. Mm-hmm.
education, everybody's in the same boat, and the cascade effect and the unintended consequences of this disease and this virus is I never thought of that. How could that be? Oh my God, that happened. So there's a lot going on out there, and being able to be nimble, which we spoke
Mm-hmm.
about, or you spoke about
Mm-hmm.
earlier,
Mm-hmm.
is important.
Yes, absolutely. So talking about being nimble, you went from press, right? From print media,
Yeah,
and you were smart. You made that shift to technology. How was that? Because we're talking about, I mean, this what we're living right now is a shift too for many
sure.
people. So then how did you go through that shift? And I got to tell you, I mean, it's wonderful that now it's like you catapulted now to an international platform, with what
Right.
you're doing right now. But how was that experience? And I know it was a while back because you've been working with mobile and technology and marketing and all of
Right.
this, for it's over a decade now, no?
Well, what's, I mean, the interesting part is about media in general.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation and the topic is going to change, but the majority of the people stay the same. So a lot of the people that we met very early on in
Mm-hmm.
the tempo days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those people, they were assistant planners. These people are all smart people that have moved on, and they're running big bit. So I've known these people for as long as I've known you, and they're
Mm-hmm.
now big shots at American Express, or they have big situations where they're controlling budget for some of the major auto manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So you're now just having a different conversation, whether it's about print or whether now it's about mobile technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that I'm not sure I was a master of any one of these platforms, but what I did do, I had the relationship with the person. So if you needed a subject matter expert, I could actually bring them in and say, listen, let's just have this conversation. And if the answer was no and they had no interest, that's fine. But you're not wasting people's time. And again, going back to what I mentioned before, you're not
Mm-hmm.
mentioning time, but the same people that were making decisions about print are now making decisions about mobile and multi-platform,
Yeah.
cross-platform, because now obviously everything's an integrated buy and
Yeah.
everything is well thought out, and what everything is so. And again, the one of the out of home companies that I ran, a company, they always had asked for all the business, and and I guess in some sales book somewhere that made sense to somebody, so a very smart media planner is not going to buy all out of home. Would that be well intended now in this environment with everything that's going on with COVID? So
Right. Right.
so the answer is that you just kind of learn along the way. So
Yeah.
in learning technology, I know enough to be dangerous, and but but if they want a smart guy, I bring somebody else in. I got as I always said to you, I got a guy. So
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I work with some really smart people. That's
Yeah.
and that
Well,
and
the
that
thing
just
is, yeah, yeah, that's something that I always admired about you is that you're just, and that I learned from you too. It's like, yeah, it's like I don't need to know everything. You just surround yourself with, with other
smart
people. Like
people.
I'm really kick ass at this one or two or three things, but I can't do 12 things very, very
No.
well.
And
Yeah.
also, I think, Sammy, to your point, when you talk to a lot of these savvy, sophisticated, whether it's an organization or an individual, the fact is that They don't want you to be the Willy Loman character where you're, chief cook and bottle washer. You do everything. Like you said, we're a global organization. So we have 8 offices in Europe. We have one we actually have 2 in the Far East, and we also have in Latin America. So, and then obviously your U.S. footprint as well. So what it comes down to is you need people to succeed. We don't do everything. So I got the greatest group of people and make me look like an all-star. So my job is to make my boss look like an all-star, and their job is to help. And collectively, we've built one company, and now we're going to do it again. So to me, it's always about the people you've had around. Like going back to our original premise of me and you. We were much more valuable together, in at least in the post. I mean, in the New York Post setting. You're a smart girl on your own. You don't need me to succeed, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Totally. I want to go back to something else, because you talked about when you speak to people about this value proposition, and how do you say, make sure that you focus on the nuances, and that a lot of outsiders might see the sales process. I'm like, that's a whole bunch of lies. You alluded to that before, but that's also another key thing that I've observed, when we work together, and that I took to heart, is like, if it doesn't, you can't fit a round peg in a square box. I mean, if it doesn't work, they're going to see right through it, and they're going to know you're full of shit, So,
and there's not
focus
enough
on the
budget there.
nuances. Go ahead.
And you know what the problem is too, especially when you get into mobile technology, it all, from a buyer side, let's say you're a buyer, it all sounds like white noise, because the differences may be marginal, but the difference is the person selling. So I'm not saying that I'm the best salesman. All I'm saying is
you are, Bobby. Yes, you are,
but
Bobby.
What I'm going to say is I'm accountable. I'm an accountable sales guy who's not going to leave you high and dry. And if you guys do make a mistake, we're going to work out a solution. And because it's media. Media is fast paced. Mistakes happen. And so, and again, that you're going back to the relationship. It all matters about the relationship. So what it comes down to is being able to create that. Go lean on the relationship, discuss the nuances, and then being able to really clearly differentiate, because now with a lot of competition in all phases of media, and I think over the next couple of years we're going to even see another breakout. So then that's my own prognostication in terms of what's going on. But I do think that it's being able to cut through that noise quickly, effectively, and not waste people's time.
Yes, absolutely. As the years gone by, not that we're too old people, but we see more women in the workforce. I know that you're surrounded by lovely, smart, independent women. You're the only guy in your home.
No doubt. I'm surrounded.
You're surrounded by daughters and your lovely wife. And, what role have you seen, women play in the workforce and in entrepreneurship, and also in senior level, like decision-making process? Because I've been removed from that. I work with my clients and stuff, and I see a lot of women, but in like media sales, or these types of integrated marketing platforms, what does that landscape look like? Because I'm so far removed from it, that I want to see your take on.
It's very interesting. So I was hired by a middle-aged white gentleman, great guy, smart guy, but he was not a CEO. He found his place. He's working for a very, very super successful agency now as the COO. And when they hired me, I kept telling these guys, I'm not the future of this company. I'll get you going, and we'll start this thing, and we'll work hard, and we'll do it. So when I started hiring women, not because they're going to be beautiful and going to be able to walk through the door. It's that you need a full portfolio of individuals and skill sets to get through. So they were very, open-minded, because it was about get it done, going back to what we spoke to before. So it was about being open-minded. And but to me, I wasn't open-minded. I was just hiring the right person. So and again, I don't want to tell you how wonderful I am as an altruistic human being, but what it comes down to is you're hiring quality, and it doesn't really matter, because you're all running to the same goal line. So
totally. So, but it's really,
and my sister actually opened the room. I think she is the largest woman-owned agency in the state of New Jersey. So she's been super successful,
Yeah.
and it's only because she doesn't like no as an answer either, and she just she's persistent and she's got nerve. She reminds me a lot of you in a lot of ways because she just was very successful, and she said, I couldn't work for other people, so I hired myself, and so I think it's all based on the determined on the individual, because just hiring a woman to hire a woman, or hiring a man to hire a man, or hiring any ethnicity, that to me doesn't make sense. I understand that you want to spread it out, but by the same token, you still got to hire the right person,
people for the job.
Right.
Yeah, irrespective of
Correct.
what
Of
they
gender,
look like, or
religion,
who they are, or
race,
whatever.
right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Totally. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
And so as we move forward, how do you see and this is more of a rhetorical question, because I know you're in the thick of it. How do you see media transforming? Is there anything that you can see, like a trend, or because you've been through a couple of shifts, from print to online, then online
and out
to
of home,
mobile, out of home, and all of that. So
and that's an interesting question now, especially with COVID, only because the thing was, mobile became the answer for a lot of media because it was accountable media. So if I served you an ad in Orlando, and you went to the next town over and went to a Dick's Sporting Goods, or you walked in, I was able to quantify the fact that I served you an ad. I didn't know it was you, but I knew there was device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because everything's anonymized. But by the same token, when you went into a Dick's Sporting Goods, or let's say a Victoria's Secret, or whatever that would be unique to you, I could actually know that you received an ad here and you physically walked through. So those are real numbers. So the old saying about advertising: 50% of my advertising works. I just don't know which 50%. John Wanamaker said that back in the early 1900s, right? So even with the Post, if I was selling to a male-dominated product, I'd be 56% male, 44% women. So 44% effectively is wasted on female eyeballs. So so now we have the ability. But I also think now with COVID, we can't see those same quantifiable things. So I think maybe more about branding, maybe the original aspects of reach and frequency and the big idea maybe comes back in. I don't know. It'll be interesting, because unless when we come out of this, it's even going to be more analytics. I don't know. It should be very interesting. And budgets are going to be interesting.
Yeah, the budgets too, where they allocate it, that's going to be interesting too. One of the big things that I think is coming out of this too is that you'd be surprised how many prospects, when we're engaging with potential new clients, one of the big questions that we ask when we're having lunch, because we like to take them out to lunch it's like a date, right?
Sure.
To break bread and have a little vino and see, if we jive.
And again, going back to the conversation.
Exactly. Back to the conversation to make sure that we're aligned, in terms of how we view the world and treat people and all of that. You can learn a lot from people when you eat with them. 100%. So anyway, so one of the big questions that we always ask is like, do you have any social impact programming or corporate responsibility? What's your give back? And you'd be surprised how many companies still, to this day, I think that's going to be a major shift in that arena, because there are a lot of companies that, they might donate here or there, but they don't have like a comprehensive, or intentional program that is part of their MO.
I know. Well, some people don't like even when, like, I know a specific company that I'm speaking of. It's a small business, but it's small but big in a sense. And the owner has a lot of specific interests, herself, and a lot of people that work for it may have a different interest. So it's very hard to pick an interest that interests you and interests me and interests somebody over here. So it's a whole weird thing. We at SFRM, we just started something recently within the last 6 months of an environmental. So I think everybody's concerned about that. So,
everybody can buy into that. Yeah,
planting trees, and carbon footprint and all that stuff. So I think it's a very difficult thing, because not everybody agrees with the same charities. There's a lot of charities out there. That's probably the hardest sales job out there right now. Is selling, getting people to donate.
Your cause is cause.
because there's now even more so with the economy being in a very tenuous situation and a perilous in some cases perilous situation, that getting those dollars. So it's going to be a very interesting question. Unfortunately, I can't give you a really cognitive answer because I'm not that bright. Don't put me on the spot.
Stop it.
That's funny.
No, that's great. But you're absolutely, so something to think about too, for professionals, business owners, people that are looking to maybe start their business now too, to think about integrating that as well.
What's interesting too, Samí, I was thinking about the other day when somebody mentioned something about the small businesses, and small businesses being basically the engine of the U.S. Well, what it comes down to is that every single person who's ever got kids and is running a tricky tray or any kind of fundraiser go to all these small businesses to support their cause, whatever it is, and so now it's our time to give back to those small businesses and support them. So I think, going back to our original thing, it all kind of binds in. It's all cyclical. So what you put out there in the past is going to come back to you now. So if it's bad that you put out, the chances are, you had mentioned a person on a previous call that he just was never really successful because he was a little bit creepy, he was a little bit weird, he didn't he wasn't authentic or genuine. So that is transparent.
Or he was, but he was creepy.
Well, whatever it was.
He was a jerk.
But he was right, and he wasn't a good person, right?
Yeah,
and that was but his problems are still there. So so going back to the original thing we were talking about in terms of having your reputation, you only have it once, and if you treat it like gold, you'll do the best. You're not always going to do 100% right, but you can try like heck. And heck, oh my God, I'm getting PC in my old age.
Yeah, you're getting PC.
I don't know.
So, I'm like, we've gone through this whole conversation. You haven't called me dude once. You haven't called me dude once, which is like my nickname. And number two, and you haven't dropped an F-bomb. I mean, this is like completely. This is a Smitty. It's like you're losing your touch.
I'm losing my fastball. But that's funny.
I'm not saying. Oh, wow. Are you blushing right now?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. It's so funny.
I'm messing with you.
No,
Listen,
of course.
We could talk. We could talk for hours. Hours. I'm just so thankful that you remain my friend. Can I tell you, from the New York Post, there's three. But two that I speak to on a regular, but three that I stayed in touch with, just because, you reach out and then whoever.
Because I always think there's something there.
It's a two-way street. Right. Yeah. There's something there. And it's you and Sandra Guzman, the editor. And I used to fight. Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And I used to fight. We used to fight with Sandra all the time.
Because she was doing, that's separation of church and state, right?
Yeah, the editorial and advertising and marketing were always supposed to be separate, so there was always a battle. But I was surprised that when I left the Post, or when I got laid off, right? Let go because of the recession,
right?
In 2008, she called me like the same day when she found out, and she said, and you did too, actually, and she said, hey, how are you doing, this and that, and I'm like, no, it's okay, I have a plan, I think I'm gonna start my own business. And she's like, I want to make sure that we stay in touch and that it's all good. And I tell her, wow, I says, Sandra, I'm like struck because we're always fighting. We were always fighting.
You're like sisters, though.
Yeah, and that's what she told me. She's like, yeah, but I love you, and you're like my sister. We've been working for 4 years, and I respect you, and it was awesome.
But there was a lot of success there, and there was a story to be told on the back end of that. And like I said, so the fact is that that was my whole thing, where you create something out of nothing, or I did. When you help create something out of nothing, it means something. So being able to getting into technology and when you start to do that, it's kind of a different feeling. You started your own business. I never had that kind of nerve, but I just, I always, we were a publicly traded company, but it was like almost like a brand new company. So, but I didn't have the financial exposure that a lot of these people now, because I talked to a lot of people across the board in different verticals who have were trying to start, like a guy who's trying a cider business out in Western Jersey. You know, he's a multi-millionaire, ex-Goldman guy. But the fact is that he's got all this product, and you know, it's perishable. So, you know, everybody's got story. A guy owns a bus company, 800 people. Restaurant guy had over 350 people go. So all of these things, people are really feeling it. But I do think that the reboot for 2020 is going to be pretty strong, and I think the resilience of America is really going to be seen, and it's going to be one of those great stories. So,
amen to that. Amen to that. And so, just key takeaways, people. Right? Bank on your relationships. Number 2, just be real. Keep it real. Everyone's going through the same turmoil. This is a collective crisis, you know, and so keeping it real, you know, people appreciate that. And be mindful of balancing those relationships without imposing and without, you know, jeopardizing, you know, they're feeling comfortable with you being able to lean on them, and then them in turn being able to lean in on you, right? Anything 100%. Else, Smitty? Please drop the mic. Drop the mic, Papa. You can do it.
Listen, dude, I love you. You know, you're the greatest, and I appreciate it. And tell Chris he's a good man for setting this whole thing up, and I appreciate it. And you're a doll, and I'll call you real soon, and we'll stay in touch. That's a guarantee.
Okay, thank you so much, Papa. Love you so much, Smitty. You do, Bobby. Okay,
take care, Chris. Bye-bye.
Bye. This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.